Radio.
That's major. The Amsterdam is pretty serious.
Yeah,
it's serious within the African American or black news. But when I was trying to publish this work, no one wanted it. Some people were very sensitive about how it was published, and the sports editor for the Amsterdam News, Howie Long, I believe, he knew exactly what I was trying to do, because this is a very sensitive topic, because it involves the dynamics between Asian and, of course, and quote unquote Black Americans. So it's not a finger pointing kind of a contest, but it was to just identify elements of racism that were there, because the bottom line is that Black men in martial, quote unquote Black men, the African men that are here in the United States, they were dominating sports competition for most of the 60s and 70s.
Right.
And a long story short, what I come to find out that Bruce Lee wasn't a fighter. And so, right. And this is the reason why you don't hear about them.
Wow. Bruce Lee wasn't a fighter. Okay, no. Wait, hold on. You offended a lot of people by saying that.
No, listen, I want to share something with you. I kind of came full circle with this. I don't want it to take, because this could be a whole show in itself.
Right.
But when I first started this project, I had interviewed this real crazy guy. You've probably seen this movie called Bloodsport.
Yes.
And it was about this guy named Frank Dukes. Now, Frank Dukes is full of dog shit, but that's separately, he tried to attach his name to a lot of people, but he was the first person to really put me on to a lot of the Black martial artists.
Right.
And so I called this one brother up. His name was Ronald Duncan. He's acknowledged as the first practitioner of ninjutsu in the United States. He's called the father of American ninjutsu. And he didn't want to tell me at first. He just gave me a little snippet of what happened. And I started, for several months when I was doing this article for the Amsterdam News, working on the article, I come to find out that, there were tournaments in the 60s, except every weekend, in California, Chicago, New York City, almost every other weekend. And Bruce Lee didn't fight at all. He'd go to the tournaments and do push-ups like a motherfucker, or do demonstrations, but he wouldn't fight. And
No, go ahead, finish your statement. I want to say something after that.
So basically what I just come to find out was there was a difference between him and an actual practitioner, and I couldn't figure, and even over the years, I put a lot of clips online, and people Google like Forgotten Fury, they know who I am. And so I couldn't figure out why the hell all these guys talking about how great he was. And basically when he died, they realized that they could attach his name to their resume and make more money.
The brand, pretty much.
Exactly. He's gone. It doesn't hurt them. Oh yeah, he taught me everything I know. And then, so it was an interesting experience, and a lot of that work has just coincided with my travels and so forth. And so people who out there probably know me, they know me through that work, because I've had more people on YouTube. Like I'll publish some of my videos in relation to travel, and they already had seen my videos about martial arts.
Okay. I have a question, or more of a statement. So it was a while ago where I was on YouTube and I saw something, it was some clips of like some Black martial artists. It may have even been one of your videos where they were talking about Bruce Lee and him coming to the tournament and things like that. And
that's Vic Moore.
Okay.
That started with me.
Okay.
I was the first person to go down there and meet with him.
Oh, wow. Okay. I didn't know that.
Yeah, this was 2009. And no one had, now somebody actually is doing a Vic Moore documentary now.
Right.
And so the thing was, everybody's seen a clip. There's a clip where Bruce Lee is like flashing a punch at some brother's
face. Right, yeah.
That brother was an international, the first national, not just Black, but the first national champion of the United States.
Oh, wow. Okay, so going back to that statement you just said, because Bruce Lee came to these tournaments, And I guess he wasn't fighting, right?
They were all getting, they were getting fucked up. That was MMA back then.
Right. Okay.
And see, I want to point something else out, and I want to, because like I said, this could be an entire show. Right. There was MMA back then. There was like wrestling versus wrestling versus boxing.
Right.
All that shit was going on back then.
But it didn't really have a name for it per se.
It wasn't called MMA, right? And it was really taboo to do like that kind of full contact stuff. But these like Chuck Norris, he paid his dues, man. Chuck Norris, long and short, man. Chuck Norris kind of like, I had a guy tell me, the guy's name was Aaron Banks. And anybody who's in the martial arts world, they know about him. He passed away, but he was a promoter. Chuck Norris turned his back on the martial arts community because he was, when he did that movie with Bruce Lee, he was the national champion.
Yeah.
He was a national champion. And so he went and did this movie with Bruce Lee, gets fucked up in the movie. And then, next thing you know, his movie, his Hollywood career took off after that, but he left the martial arts world behind.
Yeah, a lot of people tend to forget that Chuck Norris was a bad dude, man. He's really about his martial artists, his skills. And in the documentary, I put this in there, but his son just went off script a few years ago and just basically said, my father would kill Bruce Lee in a fight. Bruce Lee was only 140 pounds, man.
Wow.
He wasn't
you're breaking a lot of people's hearts right now.
No. But see,
you messing up a lot.
I want to say something. I for a while I was like, it's like Bruce Lee is shit. But the bottom line was, he was a martial artist. He doesn't have to be like, look, okay, this, you got the guys in MMA and like boxing. That's like the pinnacle, or like, Olympic wrestling. That's like the pinnacle of martial arts. But like, you have these other people walking around the streets who are like, 9th degree, 10th degree black belts and specialize in kung fu. They'll fuck you up.
Right.
And I think, Bruce Lee was in that, but there's a difference between a professional fighter and somebody who's not a professional fighter.
It's like almost like a person that's trained, that goes to train for boxing versus a person that actually boxes.
Yeah, it's a difference. Now, don't get it twisted. The guy who trained for boxing, the average person who walks up in the street, I have background in martial arts. I've knocked people out. I broke someone's eye socket before, but I'm not gonna fight Canelo Alvarez.
Right.
There's a difference.
Right. I have a question. So why do you think, like, within the Black community, or just even within the martial arts community, that people only know of, let's say, like Jim Kelly? Because Jim Kelly was a big name.
That's another thing, and that's why the article, when it was released, it was so powerful, because basically a lot of people didn't know that these guys even existed. The guy who's doing the Vic Moore documentary, when he saw it, I think he was in class, and he told somebody, he was like, he never knew that these people existed. I was interviewing a martial artist like maybe a year and a half ago, and it was S.I.N. He's like an old school Brooklyn dude. And he said something. He said a lot of parents, when they bring their children to the dojos, they'll say, we didn't know that, quote unquote, Black martial artists could be grandmasters.
Oh, wow.
So this is all about a mental trick bag. It's not an attack, because there was racism in martial arts, but at the same time, all these brothers I spoke to, they said they had excellent relationships with Chinese people. And a lot of people said Bruce Lee was cool as fuck. He would come to their dojos and smoke weed with them. And he was a cool guy. And I realized something very powerful that he did. You have to understand, Bruce Lee, I was in Hong Kong, and I was interviewing a guy called Bay Logan for Time Out magazine there. And Bay Logan said something very powerful. He said, Bruce Lee is the most recognized actor in the world, not martial arts actor. Most recognized actor, and that was his goal. He didn't want to do full contact. He wanted to make movies, and that's not easy.
Oh no, not at all.
And so he did something amazing. That's what he wanted to do, and he has a movie history before martial arts, but in terms of his martial arts films, he only has like 4 or 5, and he's recognized all around the earth. So his accomplishments are still valuable and important, and he's still a credible, ambassador of martial arts. But he's not. I mean, come on, man. He's not walking into a room like you seen when he's like beating up 50 people. I mean, that's insane.
Embellishing a little bit,
right?
And you know what's crazy? It reminds me of when I hear things like this, Clarke. It reminds me of so many things throughout our history that have been pretty much whitewashed or pretty much put to the back. For instance, I'll give you an example. There's a book called Black Ice about the Black Canadian players that pretty much started, the
NHL.
Right. And, Canada is known for the best players in the world. And, you do your research and you come to find out that this originally was our sport and we thrived in that sport. And it's just casually pushed to the back. And I had to tell this to my stepson that, do you realize the sport of hockey is something that our people created? Rock and roll was something we created.
Yeah.
Okay. That was a slang word. Okay. I didn't learn this till college.
Right.
I went to music school.
Right.
So when I hear you just bring up this from a martial arts perspective, it just makes me want to now read your articles and do my own due diligence. Right. Sure. And it's very similar to what the brother Dane Calloway is doing. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Dane Calloway, but Dane Calloway is somebody you definitely want to check out.
Yeah.
Expert researcher, field researcher. And this brother's explaining that the research he's done has proven that I'll say over 80% of so-called African Americans are not even African. They
were here.
Yeah. Aborigine
absolutely
people. So
I'm glad you brought that out.
Yeah.
The natives.
Real, to me, listening to you give this information, you're almost like the Dane Calloway of martial arts.